No satellites are driving advancements in cell service, military strategy, and climate research, but did you know they're also integral to animal conservation?
Yeah, satellites are key to mapping changing animal habitats, which are crucial to preserving endangered animals. So, for example, satellites have actually identified large stretches of forest for tiger habitats, which have lost 93% of their historic range on Earth.
They can also document areas of deforestation and help researchers map conservation areas for high priority animals like jaguars.
Satellites can also track individual animals to monitor their well-being, which was critical to uncovering a poaching ring, which we'll get into later.
And using satellites to track animals has been around since 1970 when NASA repurposed a fiberglass ocean buoy with a tracking device and fitted it to two elk, which together became known as Monique the space elk.
And so the tracking collars on these elk beamed their location, skin temperature, and other details to a weather satellite called Nimbus every day. And it was a groundbreaking idea at the time, but the collar cost $25,000 and weighed 23 pounds, which is so heavy and obviously outraged animal rights activists.
So in the decades since then, GPS trackers have gotten way lighter, thank goodness, and much more sophisticated.
And you might have remembered a few months ago we aired a piece on preserving animal DNA on the moon.
The goal is to safeguard endangered species by storing their genetic material in a safe, protected place in case they go extinct on Earth.
This piece truly sounds like it was taken out of the pages of a sci-fi novel, honestly. And after that, the Smithsonian actually reached out to us about the latest in their animal satellite tracking projects. They've conserved panda habitats in China, stopped elephant poaching in Myanmar, and even reintroduced oryx, which are a type of antelope, after they went extinct in the wild.
And we became fascinated by it, so today we're sitting down with Dr. Melissa Songer, who's the center head and ecologist at the Smithsonian's Conservation Ecology Center.
So to start, can you explain your job as a conservation ecologist and what work you specialize in?
So I am a landscape and movement ecologist, really specialized in larger mammals, giant pandas, Asian elephants, Chbosky horses, scimitar horned oryx are some of the main projects. So a lot of it does involve reintroduction or rewilding of species.
We want to go through a lot of these, talk about pandas, and we understand your work entails kind of restoring habitat for pandas.
Historically, it's really been about habitat loss, reduction in changing forests into agriculture, a lot of roads and cutting through forest areas. However, in the 90s, China stopped all deforestation in the region because the roads are still there. So we have explored ways of more quickly restoring that forest to be suitable for pandas to use. And we have had luck with that, planting bamboo in areas that haven't had pandas for decades. And we've actually had pandas return to some of these areas. So really exciting.
And how are you guys using satellites to kind of help identify areas that can kind of be restored and where pandas are likely to move?
So that's a big part of it, satellite imagery. We can zero in on areas that we know where the giant pandas are, basically take a picture of the land cover, analyze that to figure out what the different habitat types are, and then we can have a time series where we see how it's changing.
Wow, that's so cool that technology can be used in this way.
It's
the benefit.
It's amazing what we can learn. Satellite imagery going back, you can get it back to the 70s, so we can see how things have changed through the years. And it used to be you would wait every 16 days. You could get a new image, but now you can get them almost every day or every other day.
Whoa.
Wow. And how hands-on is your work versus kind of more big picture and working with international governments? You said obviously this is taking place in China. So what is your role exactly?
Building partnerships with, and it's not just working with government. So often I'm working with the Ministry of Forestry or whatever the equivalent of our Fish and Wildlife Service is. Rangers, and we work with research staff of a particular protected area where we're working. And then in the case of the pandas, we also work with the breeding centers, the research and breeding centers where they have the giant pandas.
Speaking of pandas, we don't know if you had anything to do with this, but we understand 2 giant pandas were just given to the Smithsonian National Zoo.
Yes, so I am very involved in that. So I have been very busy the past. It's really been a 2-year process. It seems like they just showed up, but it's been very long, and but we were successful. That's the important thing.
You can go and see them now? We can visit them?
You can go and see them. We had about a 3-month period of adjustment, and they debuted on the 24th of January. They're doing fantastic. It's actually a great time for them to arrive because it's not the warm months and they can just adjust and be happy in the cold. We renovated their habitats. They've got great outdoor spaces. And so, yeah, they seem to love it. It was very fun to see them rolling around in the snow.
Red, we should visit them.
I know. Next time
We
we're in
definitely
DC,
should.
we are.
Yeah.
We definitely are.
Let's talk about Myanmar, because we understand that a lot of your work was
Yeah.
there. So we know that there's a huge crisis there with elephant poaching that you guys kind of discovered by fitting 19 elephants with GPS collars. So
That's
can you
right.
kind of walk us through what you did and what you found?
Well, I started working in Myanmar in 2001, so a long time, and they have a really interesting situation there where they have a lot of working elephants, so elephants that work in timber. And so they don't even know exactly, but 4,000 to 6,000 working elephants. And so we began tracking them mostly in forest areas, but this specific project, when we discovered this poaching crisis, was in an area of high human elephant conflict. And we were completely shocked to have 7 of them poached. So, we'd never had anything like that happen before. We started working with teams of rangers to go and explore. They found an additional, I think another 12 or so carcasses just in this area. Asian elephants have smaller tusks. It's about their skin, which can be used for different things.
And how did the GPS tracking work?
The giant collar. It's 25 pounds or so. And of course, for an elephant, that's really not very much. It's basically they're wearing a GPS. They're wearing a big battery, and that's communicating with the satellites.
And so what did you see that made you think something was up?
Well, in this case, they stopped moving. And so because they have a collar, we're able to just go find them and see that they've been, in this case, they were skinned and the skin was taken. What we started to do as a result of this was communicate with the Ministry of Forestry and try to have some enforcement and discourage the poaching. After the coup, we have not been back.
What are the rules about fitting GPS collars to animals? Do they have to be 2% or less of their body weight, or what are the rules?
That's a pretty good number that we use. A lot of times it's much less than that. In the case of an elephant or some of these larger mammals. Obviously, there are tiny animals that we also want to track, like birds, where you have to have extremely small, small. I think the smallest transmitter is something like a tenth of an ounce or something. The battery life is often the challenge because they just, they're carrying the battery.
Is it a disadvantage for an animal to have like a collar or a tag in any way? Like, does it slow them down if they're running away from predators, or is there like a scent to it that sets it apart from other animals?
If we're going to work on a new species, we try to test the collars. And so we can put collars on and we can actually monitor their hormones to see how stressed they are. We did a very extensive study on the scimitar horned oryx and the horses, and we did see that, once you put the collar on, their stress goes up, but it flatlines again pretty quickly. Is there any kind of a social component there? I'm really interested in that. It's not something that we've really seen evidence of either way. Like, one animal's wearing a collar, is that cool or is that embarrassing? Or we don't really know. Really important that we are tracking them because we need to know how they're surviving, what the threats are, how we can better manage and increase their chances for survival and maintaining or developing a population in the wild. So that's really critical information. And, we've had success. The scimitar horned oryx is a species that we worked on really from the beginning. They were completely extinct in the wild, and we were involved in, or we still are involved, but monitoring almost every single one. They have had amazing success. So, for 30 years, their status was extinct in the wild. And normally you would go extinct in the wild to critically endangered to endangered, but they actually moved to the endangered species list, which was a big upgrade.
How did your team go about making those decisions, how to reintroduce them in the wild? What considerations?
That was a coalition. I think we had 20 different organizations, and we began planning it in probably 10 years ahead of the actual release. The leader of the program is the Environmental Agency of Abu Dhabi, and they had, at the time, it was about 3,000, 4,000 oryx, on big lots that they wanted to reintroduce somewhere. And there were a couple of sites that were considered, but the one where they ultimately decided to start releasing them is Central Chad. We don't want to put them somewhere where it's just going to be the same story again.
And are you still working on this project? Like, what is the ultimate goal? Like, where are the oryx now?
Right now, the plan is to continue, at least for another year, to continue to release oryx.
Are there any other projects that you think would be interesting to our audience? You might have seen I have 2 cats running around.
Oh, you're interested in cats? I don't work on any big cats. I guess the closest thing to a carnivore would be the swift fox. That's a project that is in Montana. That is a species that did not go extinct in the wild, but was extirpated through 80% of its range. So in this case, it's not captive animals that we're releasing, but we're going to other states that have them, which is great because they're already in the wild. Tracking them and, learning how well they're surviving and that they're reproducing, allows us to find dens sometimes and see that, their offspring. And so it's just, I don't know, it's exciting.